Welcome to a new edition of the Neon Jazz interview series with Jazz Vibraphonist, composer, and Band Leader Christian Tamburr. We talked to him in late March 2020 when the spring quarantine was really heating up, and we talked about his Septet CD The Awakening, Sounds for Sculpture. This internationally renowned performer has been in over 67 countries around the world and first started performing at the age of 14. And he's performed with legends like Clark Terry, James Moody, Barron, Milt Hinton, Bucky Pizarelli, Nicolas Payton, and so many others. He's got great stories. Dig it.
Hi, Christian.
Yes.
Joe Domino, Neon Jazz Radio in Kansas City.
How you doing, Joe? How are you, man?
Hey. We're just, I think like everybody else, we're just surviving,
Oh, man, I don't even know where to start.
I don't either. And now, are you up in New York?
No, I live down in the Raleigh-Durham area in North Carolina. So,
okay.
It's kind of got its own interesting spin on everything. But, I was based out on the West Coast for many, many years. From 2009, I kind of bounced between San Francisco area and Las Vegas. And then about a year ago, I made the move here to North Carolina for a little bit of a change in scenery, so to speak.
Well, we all got that now, don't we?
Man, yeah, this is I don't think I've noticed the trees more. I mean, it's the thing my wife and I were talking about. Like, we went for a walk yesterday, and we, stopped in the middle of the road and watched this leaf just kind of, float across the, it was caught in the wind, and it just kind of floated across the, across the street, and it's like, I don't remember the last time we had enough time in our lives to just stop and watch a leaf float by.
Yeah. Well, yeah. It almost sounds like you're becoming a Buddhist.
I know. Well, maybe. But it depends on what kind of time I've got going on. So.
Right. Well, I was just driving down kind of a rural road, and all of a sudden I saw this deer come flying out, and then I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, well, I'm getting my camera out, and maybe I'll take a picture. And then all of a sudden, there's a dog that comes out looking for it, like it's chasing it. And it's like all these animals now have enough quietude and latitude that I think they're frolicking.
Yeah, it is. It's, we're kind of in the same vibe. I mean, my wife and I have a 4-year-old daughter, and, she's been out of school now for about 2 weeks. We took her out just because, things were starting to get a little wild. So, kind of like the Bay Area, there's a relatively large research, RTP is the Research Triangle Park here, and so there's a lot of international tech companies that are based in this area. So you've got a real influx, not as much as probably New York or anything like that, but of folks that are in and out of Asia, in and out of Europe, just because of the technology hub. And so we were starting to get nervous about, just having her in school with all the, folks that you just don't know where they're going and coming and going, and families and all that stuff. So we took her out of school. And so, I'm doing daddy daycare with, running preschool here in the mornings, and, I love it. I mean, it's a part of my life that, you just don't even think about having, you let the teachers do that, and but I'm really enjoying getting this part of, I don't think I would normally have this kind of experience. So we're trying to really embrace the change in life as best as we can. So, it's like, it is what it is. You really can't change it or anything like that. So we're going to ride it out.
Yeah. And I guess that's why I'm reaching out more, as a jazz radio host, I get CDs every week, between 5 or 8 of them. And I know that everybody's time schedule is always crazy. Sometimes certain albums jump out at me, and I just know how it works. But what I'm going to try to do now is contact every single person that I can ever imagine, because I think that to have this opportunity to speak during this time about this and to have an oasis away, I think it's going to be a really good thing for everybody, for you, for me, for all, So it's been, and of course, everybody I contact, it's always it's usually a thing where it's like, all right, well, let's get a day and time, and it takes a while to get back. And now it's like every PR agent and musician's like, all right, whenever you want, let's do it.
Yeah.
Just call me.
Yeah, we are literally wide open. Yeah, it's wild. I mean, the schedules are crazy. I mean, it's, and I had a real heart-to-heart with Chris as well as Mark at Groove, and I just said, about a week and a half ago, and I said, guys, are we moving forward with this? Is this the right time? Is this the right thing to do? I also had a relatively robust conversation with the Seward Johnson Atelier, right? Because this partnership, which, you know, is I have control over, but still being respectful to the dynamic of that partnership and just saying, listen, we're releasing this record and we have a whole campaign built around it. Like, these are crazy times, but, you know, we all agreed that, you know, if there's ever a time where people really need something to dig their ears and eyes and minds into, where they can't be out distracted by other things, you know, I might as well take advantage of the fact that we have a bit of a captive audience. So I think what you're doing and allowing artists to share their music and, you know, try to get awareness of what's going on, because, you know, we've been planning this for months and months and months, if not longer. And so the fact that this, you know, coronavirus kind of popped up in a, you know, unopportunistic time, it's just kind of an unfortunate thing. But, you know, we're pushing forward through it, and I think what you're doing is absolutely right. I think artists are eager to talk and, you know, share what they have. It's really all we've got at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a unique perspective. I've been getting a lot of really good answers about what the hope will be for when we come out of this, and what the audience appreciation will be, because as we know, jazz audiences tend to be lower, and there's kind of just there's just a lot of things that go into it. There's been a lot of interesting revelations, and I think this time in our lives can be an art incubator, and I don't know that necessarily people want to read novels about this probably for a while, but I think the revelations and recollections and hopes and dreams of all of that, we are definitely living in what we would probably consider a wartime, one of the most unique things that no generation has ever seen. So I think it's good. And I think in the spring, in the fall, I think we're going to see a lot of very interesting albums come out from artists that just will blow our doors down.
Yeah, it's like this is a time to kind of hunker down and be creative. And, you know, one of the things that I've, you know, when you're out touring and you're out just doing the day-to-day of maintaining the career, which is, you know, I always say it's like 80-20. You know, 80% of the time you're maintaining the career, 20% of the time you're actually out there doing it. You know, like that's the business, that's the day in, day out, right? And that period of time that you have to carve out between the touring and the family life and all the other things to actually sit and just be creative and just say, today I'm just going to sit and write. I mean, that just doesn't happen under normal circumstances. It really takes planning. And so now you've got a lot of people sitting around with a lot of content and a lot of inspiration to, you know, share their art and have the time to do it. So as well as learning like other skill sets, like doing video editing and live streaming, like all this other stuff that I think we all were aware of being beneficial, but now it's becoming crucial to being able to keep our artistry present. So it is what it is. So hopefully, the fall will bring you some new exciting stuff to share. That'll be great.
Yeah, without a doubt. So let's go ahead. I'm going to just go ahead and start at the top here and say thank you for taking a minute out to talk with me on Jazz today. I appreciate it.
Great.
So let's start off here with your album, with your Septet, The Awakening, Sounds for Sculpture. Talk to me about what your artistic vision with this album was.
Sure. So, you know, it had been a few years since I released my last record. And a lot of times my records are, I think like a lot of artists, you know, we kind of split down the middle of, you know, choosing from a Great American Songbook standards, you know, tunes that, you know, we're used to playing and, you know, a couple of originals. And that's always kind of been my MO. And, you know, that's some of my biggest influences. And so I find myself kind of saying, well, it's about time for another record. And I was doing a performance in Hamilton, New Jersey, at the Grounds for Sculpture, where Seward Johnson, who was the sculptor, who all of the sculptures that this new record kind of revolves around, has most of his pieces on display. And it doesn't take a lot for me to be, you know, moved. You know, I love movies. I love theatrical productions. I'm always hearing the music. But this was something completely different, you know, to walk around and see sculptures. And the way that he sculpts is so dynamic. it was an immediate inspiration. And so I had never done a project like this, to take a physical art form, at least something that's not moving, something that's, like a physical, and create music around it. And every time I came upon another sculpture, I could hear the tune. And so I thought, this is my next record. And, gratefully enough, I was close enough with Seward and reached out to him and told him my crazy idea, and they said yes, and off to the races.
That's wonderful. That's very, very cool. So we kind of touched a little bit geographically where you're at, where you came from, but let's go back to where you were born and raised and kind of how you got into jazz.
Yeah, sure. I was originally born and raised in Central Florida, just off the East Coast near Cape Canaveral. And, I was fortunate enough to be coming up in school, in public school, where music was really this was the 90s, and we really had a strong music, presence and arts presence in the public schools. And I played guitar and piano, and both instruments were not offered in band, right? My band director said, well, you have to play a real instrument or a band instrument. And so I selected percussion. And it was supposed to be French horn. I should just mention that because I really loved the French horn. I always thought that was a really cool sounding instrument. I guess in retrospect, probably a good choice not to get that. But picked percussion, fell in love with mallet instruments. And the band director said, listen, if you want to play guitar or piano, you've got to get into the jazz band. And that's where those instruments are. So you've got to get good enough on the drums to get into that band. So I took private lessons, and I fell in love with playing this music, jazz, to get into that band. And there I was the youngest guy in the 8th grade jazz band. And the band director, put me on all the ballads because I wasn't that good, So, all the upperclassmen had all the cool tunes, Killer Joe and, all this swinging stuff. And then I was always, swishing, just swishing the ballads. And so I was sitting around a lot. And my band director said, listen, you can't just be sitting here. If you're going to be in this class, you got to be doing something when you're not playing the ballads. And so you roll the vibraphone out. And he said, there's a vibraphone. And when you're going to play what the trumpet players play and what the sax players play. And that was it. It was kind of blew my mind. Nobody else played it. And I really fell in love with this kind of crazy instrument, and took that through college, through high school and into college, and just, it was just, I don't know, it was meant to be that moment of, hey, this is this new crazy instrument that you haven't seen, and it was just a unique moment in time that I think if he hadn't decided to roll that out, which by the way, it was covered with music, it was essentially they were using it as like a storage cart for music, and so I had to take all the music off of it. And but that was kind of how it all started, and fall in love with the music ever since then.
We are biased around here at Neon Jazz. The Vibes is like one of our favorite. It's my favorite instrument, and the thing that I always find interesting is that each instrument has its own perks or pitfalls or whatever you want. What is it about the Vibes that maybe somebody doesn't know that's very interesting and revelatory about playing that instrument?
Sure. So a lot of people aren't, well, first of all, until you hear it, people don't, well, first of all, most people think it's a xylophone or a marimba. So they're not really sure exactly what I'm doing. And so I'd have a nickel, if I had $1 million, it's a nickel for every time somebody said, hey, we love the way you play the xylophone. But the instrument was designed as a sound effect instrument. And really what is utilized as, when you think about it's probably iconic melodic, recognizable sound was NBC. And it was used in the radio studios as a sound effect instrument for sci-fi, and it has, these thin metallic bars that ring and ring and ring, and then they attach this vibrato mechanism that gives them this kind of wafting, depending on how fast the vibrato is set, this really kind of spacey, new agey kind of like sci-fi sound. And that's what it was being used for. And, when you think about the great players, Lionel Hampton, Red Norvo, that were coming up through the ragtime and that transition of ragtime into the early jazz, like they were playing on instruments that, they were playing on marimbas and xylophone. They weren't very melodic. They're very percussive. And here is this unique sounding instrument that has the ability to sustain like a piano and carry a melodic line. And so here it went from literally being a sound effect to being kind of the forefront of the instrument for that sound in jazz. And like it's an iconic sound, MJQ and Milt Jackson and Bobby Hutcherson and Gary Burton. There's just so many great players that took this unique thing and turned it into a voice that's so recognizable now in jazz.
Was it always a foregone conclusion that jazz was going to be your life?
No, because it started as, concert band, right? And I started as a classical percussionist. And that's what I was studying with a percussionist by the name of Brian Slauson. And, he was working me to be a classical concert percussionist. And actually my first instrument was a 4 1/3 octave rosewood marimba. And it wasn't until I started really falling for the dynamic of improvisation of jazz did my parents start helping me pack the marimba up and bringing it to this little jazz club in Cocoa Beach called Heidi's and rolling in a 7.5-foot long marimba. And so, it kind of changed there going from junior high school into high school that I think this is probably going to be the thing I did. But I maintained my classical percussion chops as long as I, really could before, I had to sell that gear so that I could afford more vibraphones.
Nice.
Yeah, well, not a lot of use for, what is it, the crash cymbal. I used to have like 2 sets of crash cymbals, and I remember saying, it's like $800 worth of crash cymbals. I could buy an entire keyboard for that. I had to get rid of some of the gear.
Yeah, without a doubt. So let me ask you this. What was the first live jazz show you saw where it just blew your doors down and you thought, man, this is what I want to do with my life?
Let's see. I'll try to give you a date. Probably 1994, Ira Sullivan. And down in Cocoa Beach playing at Dino's Jazz Club. And I was blown away. And I'm not sure if you know a lot about Ira. Okay, yeah. So he's like, to me, like the unsung hero of the trumpet and the sax and the flute, and growing up and pretty much making his name for himself in Chicago. He then moved to South Florida, and he would come up and do a lot of stuff in the schools, but he would play these little jazz clubs along the East Coast, and that show changed everything. That was it, man. That was it. First of all, because he was playing all the different instruments. He was playing trumpet, he was playing tenor sax, he was playing alto, he was playing flute. And I'm going to go even further back just because my second grade teacher, now this is before I even got into I was going to play music for a living. My second grade teacher, Chris Murphy, was Pat Metheny's babysitter. And when I was in second grade, I played enough guitar that I played guitar for the sixth grade chorus singing La Bamba. And apparently I did such a bang-up job that my second grade teacher said, listen, one of my friends is coming to Orlando to play at a very big performance. Would you like to come and meet him? And when I was in second grade, I went backstage and I met Pat Metheny. And let me tell you, I really think the Ira Sullivan moment was where I had already kind of invested myself. I think I really like jazz. Let's get into that. But watching Pat Metheny, I know I was really young, but man, that show was unbelievable. And when I met him backstage, my second grade teacher said, well, tell him what you do. And I said, hi, Mr. Metheny, or Pat, I play the guitar. And Pat looked down at me and he said, that's really great. He's like, there's a lot of guitar players out there. He said, but the people that I really find unique are the ones like the guys in the back of my band that play all the different instruments. And I really took that to heart, so I never really pursued the guitar career. but yeah, I was pretty lucky to kind of have that experience.
Yeah, that's very cool. It's interesting. In the Kansas City metro area, it encompasses a lot of space, and I just moved to Lee Summit, which is the hometown of Pat Metheny.
Oh, wow. Yeah, of course, right.
So it's kind of interesting and cool. But
is he still there? Is he still in that area?
No, he's in New York, and he hasn't been through Kansas City to play for a while. But the interesting thing is, his brother Mike is a trumpeter and flugelhorn player, and when I was in college back in the mid-'90s at the University of Missouri, Kansas City, I was obviously getting into journalism at the time, and there was an old Kansas City Star beat writer named Charlie Hammer, and he had a class, and there was this guy next to me, and his name was Mike Metheny, and everybody was like, yeah, his brother's this famous jazz musician, and I really didn't know Pat. I didn't know jazz, but I was like, cool, and I struck up a conversation, and we've been friends ever since, and he's a wonderful person.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I mean, that must be a heck of a, what do you call it? A shadow to, or some big shoes to fill, when your brother is Pat Metheny, I guess. But yeah, I've heard that. I've never met him, but I have heard Mike is really, really nice and a great player.
Yeah, he's a wonderful. Yeah. And, he's a wonderful cat. He's a big ambassador for jazz here locally. So it's a good thing. So let me kind of segue into something that's ever present right now. We touched on a little bit, but I want to know from you, when the dust settles and we get away from this quarantine and what we're living through right now, and jazz starts back up and the world comes alive again, what do you hope the realization or revelations that human beings have that come to see live music and start participating in this art form that you've done for a long time live? What are you hoping may come about, and what do you think is going to happen for people?
My hope is that, well, first let me position it like this. I think that the arts and entertainment, let's just even back up even further. I think we as a people have taken for granted how easy this kind of live on a day-to-day basis, right? And we take for granted the ability that we're going to just go to the gas station, or we're just going to go to the food store, or we're going to just go see a concert. We can do that whenever we want. And now we're in this dynamic where we're sheltering in home. We can't really go and do anything. And the one place that we can kind of feed our soul is through the arts and entertainment, and that is now being done, virtually, right? Through social platforms and YouTube and the radio and just like in any wartime, you look back at how influential and how important the arts were to get us through that, whether through the message or through just the ability to kind of find some reprieve from, the stress going on around us. My hope is that, and I see it consistently across many of the artists, that they have embraced, first of all, they haven't just put their instruments down and said, called it quits. They've kind of have a call to power to learn how to embrace technology, to figure out how they still have the opportunity to reach their audience, engage their audience, and be there for their audience. And even though it's not live, if they're doing it in these live streams where they can still interact, my hope is that will really push forward an acknowledgement and recognition of the art form, whether it's jazz or any style of music or any form of art, that will give, again, an incredible value to what artists and people in this entertainment industry do for our audience, whether we can see them face-to-face or if we have to do it while we're sheltering in place. And so I think, to answer your question more directly, I really hope that there is a rebirth of appreciation for live music, and that we no longer take that for granted, and that we maybe, when we can go out and see live music and we can see live entertainers and see live comedy or see live theater, we put our phones down and we go out there and we experience it and realize how lucky we are to actually have the right to go into that. So that's my hope.
That's a great answer. So let me ask you very simply, why do you love jazz?
Man, I don't know. How long is your piece? You know, it's about the conversation. I think it's always been about, it's about the community. It's about the conversation. I think, you know, there's the cliches of, you know, jazz crosses all borders and has the ability to, you know, you can communicate, you know, and play improvisation, whatever it is, you know. To me, it's about, and now more than ever, the friendships that are, and the personalities of the people that have become so close in the creative process, whether it's touring with a band or recording on a project, to find, you know, common sounds or common influences and have that conversation with people and feel those personalities and sense of humor and sense of seriousness and sense of artistry in a way that is open and open for music to be created that's never even existed before. This new project, the Sounds for Sculpture, is the first, the Awakening Sounds for Sculpture project. It's the first all original album I've ever done. And it was, I was nervous putting 10 songs in front of my peers, mainly because I was worried that it wasn't going to be up to their, like, I don't know, I wanted them to not be impressed by it, but I wanted them to embrace it, right? And, you know, when you're writing kind of internally the way I write, it's not until you stick it on the bandstand and kind of get an ear for how it's going to work. But what was amazing was taking this music that's never existed before, with influences of songs, whether it's from Art Blakey to South American tango, or, you know, the Argentinian tango, whatever, wherever my influences kind of came from for these pieces, to then put it in front of my friends and my peers and musicians that I love to make music with, and hear them literally transform my music into what it is. And, you know, I think that's really unique to jazz. Like, I think that there's this openness and willingness that when you put that music in front of people, whether it's original or a standard, that there's going to be an adventure into something that's never been before, right? There's that basic structure that, you know, the changes and the melody, but what happens through the, you know, conversation amongst these different musicians in that moment, at that time, on that bandstand or in that studio, it's never been before, and then there it is. And so that's why I love jazz. I love that adventure. I love that conversation, and I love that the people I get to make music with on a regular basis are open to doing that, not only with me, but with my own original music.
Right on. So everything's going to come down to this. Everyone has a version or a perception of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your coworkers, but who do you think you are? What's the perception of who you think you are?
Oh, you know, I think I'm an artist who has been fortunate enough to experience a lot of different aspects of music, whether it's a performer or an arranger or a composer. I try to represent an individual that has pursued a passion for a career and happens to also love the pursuit of that passion and career. And I hope people see me as somebody who is driven by things that, not to be so simple, but to go after things that make me happy, right? The arts and playing music is what makes me most happy, and my family being so supportive of that, and being really balanced between being a good father, being a good husband, and being a good artist. So I hope that's who I represent.
Right on. That's a great answer. Hey, Christian, thank you for taking some time out today. I appreciate it.
Oh, man, it's my pleasure.
Thanks for listening and tuning in to another Neon Jazz interview, where we give you a bit of insight into the finest players in North Carolina, Kansas City, and spots all over the world, giving fans all that jazz. And thanks to Christian for his time, music, and stories. If you want to hear more interviews, go to Famous Interviews with Joe Domino in the iTunes Store. Visit neonjazz at youtube.com, and for everything Neon Jazz all the time, go to the neonjazz.blogspot.com. Until next time, support the arts and enjoy the jazz, my friends.
Neon Jazz.